Okay, we are here on the Leader Farming Podcast this morning with my friend Courtney Evans. Courtney is, wow, man, we go pretty far back, although our recent years gotten significantly closer. I remember back when I first became a Chick-fil-A operator, this guy walking in my restaurant named John Lovell, um, and he was servicing fire extinguishers and fire suppression systems, and he introduced himself and said, "Hey, I'm with American Fire Shield, and oh, by the way, we also do hood cleaning and Hoods Unlimited, and my buddy Courtney, we work together." And uh, and then somewhere in the conversation, he mentioned that he was an Army Ranger veteran, and I was like, "Look, you don't have to say anything else. Like, all right, you got my business." And so you and I have technically been working together. I've been an operator almost 15 years, and your company has been helping my company with services and hood cleaning and fire suppression systems and all that stuff. But man, it was like, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, right around COVID time frame, where
Two.
yeah, 2 years ago, where I remember where I was in my parking lot. I had my trailer, and for some reason I was taking a refrigerator or something out of the restaurant, and I was loading it up on my trailer, and I'd called you and you called me back, and we just it was just a moment of connection where we were like, man, we need to spend some more time together. And we have so much in common. I mean, we got a bunch of kids, and we homeschool. We're both entrepreneurs. And man, when I think about my lifetime goals, a lot of people are like, yeah, I want to be a millionaire or whatever. Like, my goals are, I want to have godly children. I want to have a fruitful marriage. I want to have deep friendships, healthy, long life. And then just, I just want to be debt free, like financially free of debt. And um, in that category of deep friendships, man, this is something that we are cultivating. And I can honestly say, I can count on probably one hand the depth of friendships that I have. And I don't really think you're supposed to have that many that are really deep. But you and I are certainly cultivating a very, very deep friendship, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. In fact, when we finish recording this in just a few hours, we're going to spend 4 days together at our Life Impact Wild at Heart Basic. And you've been through that a couple times, and you're a partner in the ministry, and you're bringing some guys this time. And so really looking forward to spending the weekend with you. But tell us a little bit about Courtney Evans, who you are. And I know who you are is not defined by what you do, but also, I've kind of mentioned that in terms of what you do. But just tell us, a little bit about you, and take a few minutes to tell us about your family and how we're coming into this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I was born into a big family. I do have a big family. We share that in common, but I was born into a big family. Um, I'm one of six kids, and my mom and dad had four boys and then two girls, and they started pretty early in life. My oldest brother was you know. The result of a high school pregnancy with my mom and my dad. So they were not saved, and got started that way. And but a few years before I was born, and I'm number three in the lineup, they were saved. And so I really was brought up in a really uh, happy home, had a good childhood, no major traumas. All my siblings are still alive. a lot of us, live in Georgia. Most of us live in Georgia. My dad actually just passed away a few months ago, July 19th. That it was cancer, and it was a sudden ordeal. But other than that, my mom is still living. My oldest brother, lives in North Carolina. But other than that, we're all still living around here. And we have a great big family. My mom has like 24 grandkids. And so, I mean, we just had Halloween. Usually Halloween, we just make my wife sends out a couple of texts and 30 people at her house, and so like Thanksgiving, we're all headed up to North Carolina, and there's going to be campers in the driveway, and renting a VRBO, and there's going to be 30 of us or 40 of us up there. So just, a big happy family. We are together a lot. I'm blessed that way. Very blessed. My wife was from a really small family. She just had one brother, and her story is way different than mine. Until the point that we merged in marriage. She had one brother. She went to a small private school down in Columbus, Georgia, near Fort Benning. Grew up next to Fort Benning. Her dad and mom and dad are still alive, and super nice, sweet mom, love her dearly. Her dad, super kind. He was a professor, but he just, early in Laura's life, he just wanted out of the marriage, just a peaceful divorce. He just wanted to do something else, or whatever. He just wasn't really bound by his, commitment to marriage, and so, at a young age, at 12, when she was 12 years old, he just left. And that was a tough ordeal. I mean, I mention it now because it's just so much a part of her story. Because that was, a kind of a domino effect for her, where she ended up being, of course, she was very wounded by that. She wanted nothing to do with her dad leaving. She threw a fit about it. She never, and to this day, she'll say she's a grown woman who still hasn't got over the fact that her parents divorced.
Mm.
And so she 6 years later or 5 years later, her mom ended up remarrying. Her dad remarried and started another family. And then 6 years down the road, she had just graduated high school. She went into college. Her first day of college was on her 18th birthday. And on that day, her brother just really, it seemed like out of nowhere, took his life at the Christian school that she had just graduated from. And so but what God had done in her life that was a huge blessing is they put her in that Christian school where her friends, the class of 10 people or so that she was a part of, boys and girls, they're still a close-knit community, and that incident even made them closer because of how they surrounded her in that tragedy. And then also just probably three very godly men, and when I say godly, I mean full of love in their heart, just loving people. I know them to this day. They're just wonderful people. Brother Don Wilhite, Ed Smith, Ashley, I don't know his last name, but they all, were a father figure to her, stepped in as a father figure to her. And Laura and I met in 2002, and I think her brother took her life in 96. So, and it might've been 95, but 5 or 6 years later, I met Laura, as a somewhat healed woman, I mean, that there's a lot that had happened there, but I was in my mid-20s, she's in her mid-20s. I actually, being part of a big family, my dad really wanted us to be a big family business. And and being, starting off with 4 boys, he was doing pretty good. It's like, because he was in the painting industry, or they would call it coatings industry, when it's complicated and sophisticated, the projects. And there's, it's a huge industry. He worked hard, and he learned a lot, and he really, when I was in middle school or so, he left that company to start his own business, and thinking we were all going to go join him, but he had major wounding, that I wasn't aware of, or anything that just he carried from his past, and so we didn't want to work for him. And so my oldest brother went and worked for him, and then he jumped off into the ministry. It was like, and then my second brother, who I was closest to, went off to work for him, and I'd go help in the summers, and I didn't like how anything worked. I didn't like how he was treated, and so, I remember having a defining moment with my dad that one summer, and saying, I'm never going to work for you. So I went and looking for people who, I wanted to be like, and I met, a distant relative who was in forestry, and I was like, you're a cool guy. You got a company 4-wheel drive pickup truck. That all sounds pretty awesome. You work in the woods all the time. I went to UGA and went to their forestry school, and ended up getting a degree in forestry. And it was, that all wasn't a mistake. I'm not in forestry anymore. I'm self-employed doing, totally different thing. But God used that to just to prove to me, I think, that He wanted me to be here, because I was able to chase that road a little bit. I actually got a job, ended up in North Georgia, and that industry kind of chewed me up and spit me out. I wasn't real good at it. And about the time I started my own business was the time I met Laura, my wife, and it was my mom playing matchmaker. And it was pretty much love at first sight. We've been married about, this summer will be 20 years, and we had 3 biological kids of our own. And but after probably 4 or 5 months after, so I had 2 boys and a girl. And the girl was born in 2009, and she just had her 13th birthday. And but 4 or 5 months after that, my sister's children, she ended up having 4 children. She ended up having problems with drug addiction, and by the time her kids got to about 5 or 6 years old, she just couldn't take care of them anymore. It just was all too evident that they were sick. They weren't able to attend school like they were supposed to. She was getting in trouble with, truancy problems. And so I just stepped in, and we took in her first child, and then her second, and then the last 2 jumped on board at the same time. And so that's how I ended up with 7 kids, like Zach. And so that's who Courtney Evans is. And the spiritual journey's not really been talked about, but I guess, I could just to summarize, that's who I am. I started that business about the same time I met Laura. It's all in the fire protection kind of realm. It's what I'm good at. I have a weird talent for being good at cleaning kitchen exhaust hoods, and then that led into fire extinguisher work and kitchen suppression work. And I started in February of 2002, and now it's November of 2022. So can't believe it's been 20 years. But yes, and this will be a good transition, perhaps. But yeah, man, 2 years ago, Zach had been a customer of mine for a long time. And you called me at a God divine providential moment in my life.
Mm.
And you just really, if my memory serves me correctly, you had a tag that was out of date that you needed help with, and then the next
Mm-hmm.
thing you know, we're an hour deep into a conversation, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how, you know, God works, and that, my call was, like you said, yeah. I mean, I had a sticker. Part of the industry is you have to have these tags or these stickers that show, when things were cleaned, as part of the regulation, to make sure that there's not going to be a fire, and that sort of thing. And I guess your guy had providentially forgotten to update the sticker, and I was like, hey man, I know y'all came out. I need the sticker updated because somebody had pointed it out during inspection. And I was like, oh man, and um, so yeah. And then, like you said, I mean, it turned into to a deep conversation that has continued since that day.
Mhm.
And yeah, so, one of the things that we talk a lot about here on the podcast is, just this idea that the world that we live in teaches us that success and performance and achievement are all, based on, grit and drive, and again, there's a place for that, right? But it's all, everything has to be up and to the right, as I say. If you've got this chart, performance over time is just off the chart, up and to the right. And if for some reason, you have a bad month or a bad year, you're looking at that as to, what did I do wrong? Or, what is wrong with me? Or, we interpret that in so many different ways toward our um, persona of achievement and performance, and then that just gets really mixed up in our heads. And there's 18 inches between your head and your heart, and so very quickly it kind of goes into that, and you start thinking, well, I start interpreting it as, I'm not enough, or I am, I'm not capable, or I don't have what it takes. And man, you and I are involved in this journey of becoming. And so maybe we tee off the next, part of this conversation with just like, as you think back about your life and the things that you've gone through, I interpret life in seasons, and it's I believe God gave us the design for that and the example for that in nature. I mean, right now it's fall, and I love fall. It's my favorite time of year. In fact, I'm really excited about going up to LJ this weekend with you, and just, man, the leaves are going to be beautiful, and it's the best time of year to be up there. But right after fall comes winter, and so many people get depressed in winter because there's no signs of growth, and everything's gray and dormant. Um and I think that one of the things that I like to remind people of in my life, and as I'm discipling people and coaching people in my business, and it's just that winter does have a purpose. Winter serves a significant purpose in that, because it's not, there's not leaves and flowers and all that kind of thing going on outwardly. The let's just use a tree for example. The tree is able to focus all of its growth and energy downward into the root structure, um, to help sustain. Think about future storms and things that are coming. And so like if the tree doesn't have to focus its energy on what is visible from the outside, and it's able to focus the growth toward depth. And really, I think roots are synonymous with the word character, and so we're growing our character, and we're sustaining, building a stronger foundation. And so I think my question for you, and you can relate this to any story that you like, about something that you've gone through that was, a difficult season, a winter season, and how you've drawn from that. But like, we talked about who you are, but I guess to tee this up, like, who are you becoming? Who is Courtney Evans becoming? And like I said, you use a story if you want about something that you've been through that illustrates who you are becoming.
Mhm. Man, and I'm glad to do the interview kind of like this. I was writing down little things. My mind will get flooded with thoughts because I am such a construction zone right now. I mean, if you just imagine, the skyscraper, or being built in a downtown area, there's just a million things going on, man. I mean, there is just deconstruction going on and construction going on at the same time, and what you mentioned really quickly, the 18 inches between the head and the heart. And that's just been something that God's been teaching me just in these weeks, just very, I find God teaching you one thing at a time. And I think that, I think maybe perhaps in my imagination sees, my head and my intellect, having all these books I've read and all my experiences and, conversations, and you think you figure things out, but man, but that disconnect, or that different location of the heart that's 18 inches here. The problem is that there's like a 1 bit bandwidth. Like there's a bottleneck right there, and it's like only one, like it takes a minute for things to go from here and actually get down into here where you're living it,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would use that to jump into, when I think of winter seasons, a real winter for me, and I'm thinking back to like the dark ages. I think in the 1300s or something, there was an ice age of sorts, or a mini ice age, they say, so I've definitely had seasons, in the last 10 years, but 10 years ago, I was in like a mini ice age, of my own heart, and so having grown up Christian, in a Christian household or whatever, I would say I even, similar to my wife, I had 3 men that I treasured, and wanted to be like. One was my pastor. We went to a tiny church, but I loved his intellect. And I don't consider myself an intellectual, but I love intellectuals, and I love learning and to try to be smarter and all that other kind of stuff. And so there was that guy, and then there was my grandpa on my mom's side, who was just a dear man, loved me. And then there was my piano teacher, who just was so pure, and I never really saw him commit a sin, And so I had that as guidance, and then but I didn't know much about scripture. I didn't know much about the Bible. There wasn't all the things that are available to us today, right? But I wanted to know. So I got married really being still a baby, sort of, in what I knew about the Bible and stuff. And so once I got married and I joined a church, I I dove in, and that also was kind of married with the time that the technology became available. You know, my first iPod that I ever got was in 2005. And it happened that 2005 was the year Hurricane Katrina hit. And our church, we had a church in December of 2005 was when I got my first iPod. So, our church sent a 12-person team down to Hurricane Katrina, and that was a providential move on God's part. I mean, I really remember being in the bus. Before I stepped on the bus, I said, God changed my heart. I'm unfulfilled, you know? And man, things happened in that, you know, that trip. Well, one of the things that happened was, I don't have time for the story, but a very special teacher entered my life through, I just got hold of his material through that trip. And I came home and just took this guy's material. And while I was out working, I could do two things at once. I had the wire, I'd wire myself up while I was working, and I would just listen to Bible teaching so much. And I was like a little soldier at our church, man. I was just volunteering for everything, you know? Yes. Oh, you guys want me to teach Sunday school? I'm on my way, you know, show me how to be. I'll be an assistant first, you know? So I was that guy, you know? And so I learned a ton about the Bible, and I was doing all the things, and our family was just a model family, you know, there every time the door was open, which was Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, you know? And then in between, I mean, my life really just became, it was all my social life. So if I wasn't talking about Jesus or in church, I was working, you know, I was or sleeping. That was me, you know, for good 10 years. But this, you know, what started to happen on the inside was something I've unpacked, and I can see it now. But there was this self-righteousness that was growing inside of me, you know, where I knew all this stuff about the Bible, and I knew all this stuff that we were supposed to be doing. And for 6 years, I had been leading, you know, a 30-person Sunday school class and teaching lessons every Sunday. And I was continually getting frustrated, you know, with the guys that would come in. And I'm like, well, no wonder, dude, you know, you're a mess, you know, I mean, you're not even reading your Bible. You're doing this, you know, I mean, I wasn't necessarily saying that stuff on the outside, but that's my judgment on the inside, you know? And that just, you know, and that I was off track, you know, didn't know I was off track, you know? But because I wasn't receiving, you know, the love of God, and I was caught on this stumbling block of like self-righteousness, you know, what it ultimately ended up happening was I ended up going into this mini ice age of a winter and a midlife crisis when I was in my mid-30s about 10 years ago, to where I was so angry at everything that, you know, and just, I'll tell you what I did in a second, but like I was just so angry with every part of I was angry with my customers. I didn't want to talk to them. I was angry with my workers. I didn't want to deal with them. I was angry with the people at my church. I didn't necessarily want to deal with them. And I was just so angry, and I didn't even know why. And I would hear the song. I remember Crowder, you know, David Crowder put out these old hymns, and you know, one of those hymns was like, the words were like, you'll know them by their love. And I was like, there's no love in me. Something's wrong, you know? And so, you know, like that put me in this place where, I mean, it was, it probably took maybe 2 years to fully come out, you know, but the end result, because I still hadn't gotten to the point of any kind of breakthrough or change or whatever, that I just got like that summer. I remember it was like 2012, summer of 2012. I had a little accident. I fell off a ladder. I broke my heel. I broke my wrist, and I couldn't put weight on my left foot for 2 months. I remember going to the doctor, and saying it, and you're like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, can you prescribe anything so I don't get angry? You know, because I wasn't a drinker, I wasn't, you know, whatever, but I was just angry all the time. And he was, I could tell his confusion and his helplessness. They ended up giving me a prescription, and they were like, you know, it'll give you maybe a few weeks to kick in. And after it didn't kick in, I threw the stuff away, because like a month later, I end up in a rage, and I'm thinking I'm going to damage every relationship I'm in, because I'll just come off the handle and yell. And then I turned to drinking, not for long, but I turned to drinking for a little bit. I was like reading a book, and I'm like, well, President Truman used to drink bourbon. Maybe I'll give it a shot, you know. But and that ended up being a bad path for me. And so what ended up happening was I just did a pull my roots up. And I remember being so discouraged in that season, that because I remember I said I was such a good little soldier, and I wanted generals. I wanted people to tell me what to do, you know, that I just kind of walked away, and I thought, I have no teachers, you know. And that was literally what I thought to myself. And I remember having the conversation with people. I was like, if they had anything to show me that was going to be make a difference in my life, really, they would have told me by now. I would know by now. I was out looking for it, you know, all the time. You know, I was a yes man. And you know, and then I just, you know, things that people didn't make sense. You know, a lot of crazy things were going on back then, you know. We had, and I halfway, it was like I'd taken Jesus in my faith. Imagine me in my truck and rolling down the window and having my faith and just being like ready, like throwing it out. But then like when I'd released it, I just grabbed it. Hold on a second. There was something in me that said, you better not throw it all the way out.
Yeah.
You know, hold on, you know. And so I took that little piece that I'd held on to, but I was sitting there in a season where I was ready to be atheist. I was ready to be agnostic. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but whatever I was doing wasn't working for me, you know. And so, you know, I went through another 10 years. Well, and that's where, like, my wife would call it a midlife correction or crisis. That's when it started, because to her, it was a crisis. She was watching me pull our family out of church, you know, do all these things suddenly that it wasn't character of me to do. You know, a lot of people were concerned. They called me. In fact, my brothers had an intervention and tried to take me to you know, a health place, you know, a mental health place, you know, to get myself evaluated. Maybe I've got mental problems, you know, whatever. It was just so, all of it was so abrupt and such a hard change. But what was going on inside of me was this correction. And you were talking about up and to the right, you know, I was such an up and to the right guy that I like, this is my little war room. It's not very pretty. It's where I work out and stuff, but it used to be my office. And even if I wouldn't see customers in a day, I would be down here at 8 a.m. sitting at my desk as if I were going to meet customers that day. Shaved, dressed, you know, collared shirt on, pants, whatever, looking like an owner, you know, sitting right here ready. And when that little snap happened, I didn't shave my face for 2 years. My beard went down to almost my belly button. I threw out my pants. I wore one outfit, and I got in the shower with it at night and wring it out and hang it up I became a minimalist. I became a like whatever, like I just shed all these things out of my life. I wore flip-flops. I stopped wearing work boots and all this kind of stuff. And because all of it was intentional. I was completely sane, but I was like, when my kids get old enough to ask me what the heck was going on with you back then, Dad, I'm gonna have a story, you know. And really, God did bring healing into my life, you know, totally. You know, I pulled out of our church because I was in need of something and I wasn't finding it. Like, we're back at that church now, not because I'm in need, but because I want to give, you know.
Yeah.
And I found it, you know. And so anyhow, but if we were to fast forward to like maybe 6 or 7 months before you and I called and had that conversation, God had a season of change brewing, in me. And I wasn't even really aware of it. And he didn't even really bring it as a winter upon my heart. He really brought it in as like, it was a problem with one of my children, that was coming of age, and I was like, dang it, I'm the dad. I got to step in. I got to intervene, and then that started. And so when I thought I was stepping in to intervene for him, it ended up being a rescue mission for me, and I didn't even know that I needed it, necessarily, but I know it now that I found it, so there's probably, and it's just stuff I can't stop talking about. So you'll have to interrupt me and ask questions.
Well, bro, that is, man, there's a lot in there. And
can I say this? When we hung
absolutely.
up and you sent me Becoming a King, I quickly read through Morgan's, that book. And I was just like, dude, you've been reading my mail, man. It's like,
Yeah.
I identified. And so, and it brought me to this. I mean, he put beautiful words to all the things, the seasons, the excavating, when you the life of a 30-year-old man in America these days is one that's a city that, you got to tear things down before you build it. I mean, it just, all that stuff. I'm like, yep, amen. Happened to me. Yes, sir. So
Yep.
anyhow,
No.
go ahead.
No, that's so good, man. There's so much in there. The transparency that you shared and your journey. Yeah, I had this thought as you were talking. My granddad used to tell me, like, I think it was my granddad that said this. I might be wrong. It might have been my dad, but either way, don't trust a man that doesn't cut his own grass. And and not that, we live in a world today where a lot of people, subcontract that out, but if you don't know how to cut your grass, I think that's a problem. But in the same vein, I honestly don't trust a man that hasn't had a crisis of faith. Um, if you tell me that you just, grew up in I don't care what denomination or what, organization it was, and everything's just been hunky dory since, day one, and you've never questioned your faith, and you've never, really wrestled with God. I, I'm like, man, I don't know if I trust you. Yeah, there's probably a lot of self-righteousness in there, as you mentioned, and in your journey and how that was prior to your crisis of faith. And so, man, we are, I don't know if you realize this, but we're at 10:40, and
Yeah,
so, and it's, man, time flies. And uh I want to honor your time, and maybe, we can jump back on. And of course, you and I are going to get to continue this conversation all weekend. But for the listeners out there, let's close this out with, if you are speaking directly to, a young professional, someone that is, I think a lot of the folks out there listening are work at Chick-fil-A, or they're just, like, in my world, but I don't even know who's listening. I don't track the stats, but I think, they're young folks out there listening. And my question for you, if you're sitting here with them, and you're looking them in the eyes, and you want to share something that you believe will potentially change the trajectory of their life or change the course of their life. And I know this is a big question, but what would you say to them right now? Like, you've got this moment of time to share this nugget of wisdom from Courtney Evans and his, 45 years of life. And is it 45? You 45? Yeah, yeah. So I thought we were right at the same age. And what do you want to share?
I would share exactly what I shared with you before when we got on momentarily, and I told you, I woke up and I believe now that it's just the design or something of the enemy. Anything that's not a God or not a faith is of the enemy, in my opinion. I treat it that way. And I woke up with work anxieties this morning, and my first combat against that was, and this is something that just has helped me here. God gives you these breadcrumbs and then just repeat them and hold on to them, but it's God's world, if you're a very young, driven, tired, whatever person, that might be right here. And when I say that one band, it might not be right here, and I would ask you to ask Jesus to pray until the fact that this is God's world and he owns everything in it, including you and your time. That takes a lot of pressure off for me, And one of my habits that God has taught me about learning, and I've heard this from an old football coach, but repetition is the mother of all learning, And man, so one of the habits that I get into is take men that I love to learn from, and then always the Bible, because the scripture is full of men in Christ that I want to learn from, And so last week, and I stay on something for a solid week. To me, there's something magical about a week in the cycle of life, in my routines. I find ways to do things on weekly cycles or whatever, but like I'll stay on something for a week. Last week, I was on Matthew 16. And so for one solid week, that piece of advice Christ drilled into my heart and soul all last week, every single day. And then I dwelled on it as much as I could throughout the day, was that, like, what does it matter if you gain the whole world if you lose your soul, bro? Dude. I mean, and we're going to be getting into that with Wild at Heart, out of your heart proceeds your life, so above all things, guard your heart,
Yeah.
So that's it, man. So hey, ambition is this is George MacDonald says, ambition is the dirt of God's kingdom. Okay, that's where we're going to be standing on that stuff when we're in heaven, right? It's right. Just being ambitious for Christ is really the only pursuit that's worth it. And so when you get tired or whatever, just realize that your soul is worth so much more than your career, and you don't ever give it up. And Christ is here to offer us true life. He's here to give us that life, that light, of that is light to the true soul. There's going to be a movie coming out called Jesus Revolution in February. I got a chance to see the pre-screening of it, but it was about the Jesus movement that happened in 1969. Dude, we're in an era here where we're ripe with people. Those hippies that came to Christ and put away drugs, they were looking for God in those drugs, But what gave them the joy and what made that movement so huge was that they found light. And it wasn't a light that went away. It wasn't a light that lasted for 3 hours and then gave you a hangover. It was real light. It was real life. And that's where joy comes from. And so that's what I'll say.
Good stuff, brother.
It's long.
No, you're good. Well, brother, I am so grateful for your time. I'm honored to be your friend. Same. Man, I'm looking forward to spending the weekend with you.
Yep.
And until we meet again, which is in a few hours. But for our listeners out there, definitely want to have you back on the show to share some of your wisdom and thoughts. So
I'd love to do part 2. Love you, bro.
Yeah. All right. See ya.
Thank you.